All right, so this is PNP News, and I'm here with Buddy Boots, News Now Houston, Bama Camera, and myself, PNP News. Silent citizen is sitting on the sidelines. He's not going to participate in this one. He's just going to listen in. So I think we all got a shitload of comments, ridiculous comments on the Luke Air Force Base incident with Silent Citizen. So what we're doing is going over all the rules and the shit that people were commenting on and spewing out there that was BS. There was one that Time to Stand was going to go over about this zoning for that they had to report, because, you know, if you're selling the real estate and it's in with a certain boundary, you have to tell the people that that's the Air Force Base going to be noisy. And this guy was trying to say those boundaries had to do with jurisdiction of the airport. I mean, the Air Force. It's BS, so we're not even going to go in there. And Time to Stand is not going to be here anyway, it looks like. So that was so ridiculous, we're not even going to bother with that. So I'm just going to follow the screen around, and I'm going to start off with Bama. Each one of these guys is going to take apart something. So Bama, what are you going to hit tonight?
Okay, let's go ahead and get some facts out there, and I will cover. We're going to cover everything like Steve said, but let's get some facts out there. He was not arrested for photography. Silent Citizen was not arrested for photography. That's what led to the encounter. We can agree with that, but he was not led. But since we got so many comments about the photography, okay, we're going to go over all the regulations. I'm going to specifically go over what was on the sign and what we see on the sign. But let's get this straight. He was charged with trespassing and obstruction, and that's because of failure to ID. We all agree with that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
So I'm just going to go ahead and go over what was on the sign. And if you look at the sign, if anyone wants to take another look at the video, you can hit pause, kind of look at the sign. I'm going to go over what was on the sign, all right? Now, on the sign, it says, unlawful to enter this area without permission of installation commander. Now, where was that sign? That sign was by the gate. It was not anywhere near where Silent Citizen was.
Right.
It was not on that public sidewalk. It was not by that street light. It was not on the bus stop. That sign was where the gate was. Okay? So let's get that clear.
And that's not the gate where you can see the rail that runs along the wall. It's the gate where they do the inspection of people coming in and out.
Yeah.
Right, where you enter with your vehicle. As we call it in the Army, we call it ECP, entry control point. That's where the guards are stationed at. That's where all that happens. It was not by the stop.
Yeah, when I was in the Army, we called that a gate.
ECP was further down, of course. All right.
Yeah, but they had stone wheels back then, too.
So,
okay, go ahead. Sorry.
all right. And what else? Oh, no problem. Y'all interject anytime. Okay, now that's when you enter the installation. It also says, while on this installation, all personnel and the property under their control are subject to search. That's while you're on the installation. And it clearly means by that sign, why is that sign right there by the entry control point? Gee, I wonder why. If they were really serious, why wasn't it out there? And we'll go over that more in a minute about the boundaries. I think David will speak more clearly on that as far as the boundaries go. But let's just get this clear. That sign is, how far away is that? Maybe an eighth of a mile, something like that.
I don't know, but it's back there a ways.
Pretty back there. It's hard to see with the naked eye, okay? You noticed on the video he had to zoom in so you could see it, right? Yeah. Okay. So all persons in regulations, again, entering the installation. All right. So what do we see on that sign? We see U.S. Code 797, and it's called a penalty for violation of security regulations and orders. All right. And don't want to go over too much, but let's get another thing clear. He's not being charged federally. Everything is done. It's under by the state of Arizona. Okay, it's under Arizona statutes. But I'm gonna go over some federal things here, guidelines. All right. Whoever violates any defense property security regulation shall be fined under Title 18. Okay. Now, the one thing, of course, when we talk about Title 18, when it comes to those things, there is somewhat of a contradiction. But here's one thing I want to point out. It does say, the Secretary of Defense has to start with the Secretary of Defense, right? And he gives authority to certain commanders, but it has to be approved by Secretary of Defense. All right. But here's the thing. If you go further down in this regulation, all right, and it's talking about posting it. You got to post this stuff, all right? It says any regulation or order covered by this subsection shall be posted in conspicuous and appropriate places. Okay, so if he was in violation, that sign needed to be in an appropriate place. I would say an appropriate place, if they really thought that was their property, it should be up there. Okay, and the boundary should be clearly marked, and it should say right there. Okay, on that public crosswalk if they're trying to claim that's their property. But there's no signs there. You can clearly see there's a public bus stop right there. Okay, so this is just showing you how ridiculous this is.
Well, it seems to me that would have to be along the whole perimeter of the base in a big sign, because according to that, the way some of these idiots are talking about it in the comments, that even if you're standing across the street and you do it, it would be illegal. So you would have to have, as far as you can see to film, you would have to have signs posted that those people could see.
Right. So apparently to them, anyone that has a dash cam driving down the public street, apparently they're subject to that regulation according to them. I guess, right? If they want to be, hey, if you're gonna do it, be all the way about it, right?
Yeah. And wasn't Luke the one that had we heard that there was a thing about driving on base with a dash cam, and they said it's okay.
Yeah. And that was on. But I mean, so hey, were the police in violation? The police had their body cams on, right?
Yeah.
Were they in violation too?
Well, we know they have special privileges.
Right. So anyway, it's clearly a ridiculous thing that they're doing, and even if it was on the property, we already have. You got Homeland Security Bulletin 012-2010, and some people say, well, that's not a military installation, it doesn't cover it or whatever. It says federal buildings. That's what I read. It says civilians have a right to record, or citizens have a right to record federal buildings. Okay, so that's how I read that. So it kind of contradicts itself. But under Title 18, there's nothing that, and it also takes, and if you really look at it, it says an executive order. And we'll go into that more too, because there's a lot of places like that. And, Area 51 is going to be mentioned later, and we'll save that for everybody. That's going to be someone else that's going to talk about that. All right. So that's what's on the sign. And the sign is way down there by the entry control point where the vehicles actually stop and get inspected. That's where you see all this stuff. You see nothing by that traffic light. You see nothing by that bus stop. You see nothing by that public sidewalk. And gee, I wonder why. Maybe because it's public. Maybe it's meant for the citizenry of Glendale, Arizona. Just maybe. And I think that maybe is going to turn into an affirmative. Okay? That maybe is going to go away, and we'll see that soon enough. I really believe that. All right. So let's go over some of these charges that he was actually charged for. And, well, there's one more security. Let me go over this real quick. This is another code that was on there under Title 18. It's a 1382. And whoever within the jurisdiction goes upon military, naval, Coast Guard, any of these military installations for any purpose prohibited by law or lawful regulation. The only place I saw photography prohibited was on that sign way down there by the ECP. Again, I'm kind of repeating myself, but I'm just going over what was on the sign. Okay. There was no sign up there about where he was. So that's the other regulation that was on there. So the only reason I went over him because it was on the sign by the ECP, and that's what he focused on. But he was not charged for any of that stuff. Okay, he was charged for trespassing. Okay, and that's the thing. He was not charged with anything to do with photography. All right. So criminal trespass. All right. Now this is Arizona Code 13-1502. All right. A1. Criminal trespass in the third degree. Now, a person commits a criminal trespass in the third degree by knowingly entering or remaining unlawfully on any real property after a reasonable request to leave by a law enforcement officer, the owner, or any other person having lawful control over such property, or reasonable notice prohibiting entry. Was he asked to leave that property? We've all seen the video. No, he was not. All right. Now, criminal trespass in the third degree is a class 3 misdemeanor. Now, again, the important thing to note on here is you have to be asked to leave. Nowhere was he ever asked to leave. He was asked to stop filming, but he was never asked to leave. All right. And so speaks for itself. And then the obstruction, that's with failure to ID is what they're trying to claim. If you're not doing anything illegal, you have to have reasonable articulable suspicion that a crime is afoot. Filming in public is not reasonable articulable suspicion that a crime is afoot. So that charge is 13-2412.A. So to reiterate, what he has been charged for is trespassing and obstruction. The trespassing is Arizona Code 13-1502.A.1. Obstruction is Arizona Code 13-2412.A. So if anybody watching wants to reference those two, y'all can look those two up and look at the video. Y'all tell us what you think. It's pretty obvious, right? It speaks for itself.
Yeah.
It's really,
all on video.
Yeah, all on video. All right. It's going to be really interesting to see that footage. And it's going to be, I'm pretty sure we're going to see it. It's going to come out, and this problem is going to resolve itself. I really see it. I don't think they have a leg to stand on. It's pretty clear cut, and I'm sure all of us think the same thing. I'm trying to play devil's advocate. I tried to play devil's advocate the best of my ability, trying to find anything that he could possibly be charged with legitimately, and I could come up with nothing. So,
well, there was more to that report that Silent told us about earlier that I'm not going to bring up now. I'll bring it when the show.
All right, that's all I got.
There was a little bit more on that report that I want to bring up, but we'll talk about that later.
Right.
So, we're going to move on to David, News Now Houston. You ready?
Yeah, I was covering 18795 and the outer boundary there.
Right.
Okay, so 18795. This is what you get from the military guys all the time. It's there's a couple of things about this that they're confused with. All right, number one, 18795. There was a reporter that was charged under that statute in Philadelphia, I believe it was. I'd have to pull it up now to look, but and that went up to the circuit court, and the circuit court said, no, not going to work. Public photography is permitted. If you don't want them taking pictures of something that you think is secret, then you need to put it someplace where people can't see it. That's it. 18795 is almost worthless in this day and age. All the circuit courts have affirmed our rights to video anything that you can see in public. And the military guys just don't get it. Well, the other thing I'm hearing is, well, the UCMJ. UCMJ stands for the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It does not apply to civilians. It applies to contractors and military personnel only. If you're on a post, a military installation as a civilian, and you commit a crime, you will be charged under the United States Code that is applicable to that charge. For instance, Title 18, 795. That is not part of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. All right, that is a U.S. code. So get off the UCMJ stuff, because it does not apply to this guy. He is not in the military, and he's not a government contractor. As for the boundaries, we have we're just going to call him an anonymous investigator at this point. And his specialty is establishing property boundaries. And he has gone to the Air Force. He has gone to the Pentagon. He has gone to Maricopa County, Glendale, all of these things, and established the boundaries. And that area where Silent Citizen was standing has been ceded over to public access. There is an Air Force memorandum that dictates that you are supposed to paint lines of demarcation in areas that are in question for civilians, so that we will know where we can be and can't be. There's supposed to be a blue line painted on the sidewalk out there where the base property is. It does not exist because they didn't do it. So clearly, there are no trespassing signs posted there. There are 0 no trespassing signs posted there. And there is nothing to indicate that you cannot be there. He was not asked to leave, and even if he had been, it wouldn't be a valid request. So that's it. It's like, somebody want to rebut any of that?
No, but I would, you brought the blue line up, and I was afraid you might forget that, I shouldn't have. But, when we were in Corpus, they didn't have the blue line, but they had these huge double white lines with a big sign there. So you knew exactly. There was no doubt about where the boundaries were. So anyway, even though they didn't have the blue line, they didn't even have a white line, they didn't have anything indicating anything.
Well, there was the one, and to me, I thought that was clearly what it was there for. What's that freaking line he's filming?
That's the rail for the gate, I believe.
Yes, that's the rail for the gate, and that is
that is a boundary line to me.
Yeah. He was behind it.
Yeah, on our side, not on there.
Correct.
Yeah. I want to reiterate on something. Well, do a correction. The UCMJ does not apply to contractors. The federal laws do apply. There has been talks in Congress about making the UCMJ applicable to contractors that contract out to the military. But to my knowledge so far, there hasn't been any actual meaningful legislation that has been pushed, that has been really voted on for that issue specifically. So when it comes down to contractors, it's still federal laws. UCMJ only applies to active enlisted military personnel or active National Guard duty. Well, active people in the National Guard or reserves.
Okay, without doing more research, I'll defer to that.
All right, so we're done. I think we're done with that one, and we can move on over to Bunny Boots.
Oh, this will be fun. Well, let's go ahead and cover Area 51 first. The most famous secret base that has been filmed many times. Long-range photography. You can find it even on Google Maps. If you go and look up the satellite, Earth view, you can look at Area 51 to some extent and see what is there. Now, I actually spent quite a few hours using DuckDuckGo and Google looking for any hint of people getting arrested for filming Area 51 from a public location. And I know this was covered on one of your prior things. You guys, someone mentioned that there used to be a mountain that people could go up to and film the base, and then that got annexed because people were going up there and filming the base. Well, the thing is so far, every instances of people getting arrested or have been detained by the by the security guards that run around the border and all that stuff of the base, they crossed onto the base itself, where they're not supposed to be at. In fact, actually, there was a pretty big incident that blew up last year, if I remember correctly, where the military base, where there was a tourist group that drove past the "Do Not Pass" sign on a road that goes onto the military base, and the security swarmed them within a matter of a few minutes and had them out on gunpoint and all that stuff. The thing is you can't go on Area 51, but people have been filming Area 51 since, I think, in as early as the 80s from public locations on various mountaintops that surround the area. You can still film Area 51 from a mountaintop that's further southeast, I think it was, from the military base, but the view is really crappy because you're really far out there and you're dealing with a lot of atmospheric distortion. But as is, there is nothing that I've been able to find through using those two search engines and going through virus-ridden websites trying to find any kind of report of or any instance where someone has been arrested for just filming or taking photos. So that's pretty much what I got on that one. But keep in mind that there is like a no-fly zone sort of sorts, or a restricted airspace over the entire base. And so if you wanted to go and get an aerial photo of the base, you would require clearance from the government. But that's what's going to also sort of segue into this next one. Now, let me share my screen here to make sure I get the right one. Yep, here we go. Hello, Treaty on Open Skies. This was originally
the Russians
brought up because of the Cold War with the USSR. And it was when the USSR ended up collapsing and the Russian Federation came to power, they redid the treaty. Now, what essentially this treaty does is it takes multiple countries that are part of the treaty, and it allows for flights from the other nations to fly around the country. Now, the thing is they have to submit the flight pattern ahead of time, according to this treaty. And there's a lot of stuff in here. And it is quite interesting with what they got in here. Liability, they have a thing about how strong the sensors can be, the cameras and all that stuff. There's a lot of detail in this, and I'm not going to bore you too much with it. But what's also interesting, oops, let me try to, I can't, there we go. Here's the fun part right here. Raw data collected from observation flights, for example, photographic film, magnetic tapes will be available to both observing and observed parties. Other state parties will be able to purchase copies of the data in which they are interested in from the observing party. So countries that are part of this treaty, the governments can purchase that footage, that video, and all that stuff from the country that runs the flight. So let's say Russia runs 3 flights over the United States through over some of the various military bases or various areas within the United States. What happens is the UK, who's also part of this treaty, can say, hey, we want to purchase that video footage or those photos from this section. And according to this treaty, they have to make it available for a reasonable price for the most part. So, which is quite interesting. Now, I don't think the general public can purchase it, but I don't see why the general public could make an offer for the most part.
The Russians published it for free.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, they did.
So, and then also what is even more interesting is there is a quota for the amount of allowed flights that are minimally amount. Now, both the United States of America and the Russian Federation, they are very large countries. Russia being the largest, the United States being the 4th largest. And the thing is, they get 42 flights. 42 flights requested by any of these other nations right here in this listing here can say, hey, we want to do a flight, and we want to, well, they submit the flight plan to make sure all the weather is okay for doing all that, and they'll go and fly that flight out. And we have to allow 42 flights, same with Russia. 12 flights for Canada, 6 for Denmark, 4 for Spain, as you can see. You got quite a few countries that are signed on to it. I mean, you even got Ukraine and Turkey involved in this. And what's even further interesting, let's see here, I got to zoom. Whoops, did I pass it? Yeah. And what's even more interesting is there's a limit on how far out from the various military bases they can fly out. Like in the United States, Washington Dulles Airport or base there, it's 4,900 kilometers, which is pretty much a good portion of the continental United States right there. And then up here in Alaska, Elmendorf Air Force Base is where they're supposed to fly out of, and that's where they're supposed to store their observation planes and all that, observation aircraft. And it is 3,000 kilometers, and that's literally almost the entire breadth of the state of Alaska. I'm not sure if that covers the Aleutian Islands all the way, because the Aleutian Islands extends out pretty far.
Yeah.
And then let's see, Lincoln Municipal, I think that's actually towards the middle of the United States. And then you can see the various bases that where all the nations can take off from within Russia. I mean, there's one base in Belenex. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I probably butchered it. You got Bulgaria. Canada's got 3 bases. And, I mean, those are pretty large distances to cover. And then you look at Denmark, 800 kilometers, 250. Greenland is the exception there with being 5,600 kilometers. But I'm not sure how many people want to go and look at glacier and barren mountains for the most part for Greenland. Though there is that one United States hidden base that we stashed up there and then abandoned. Spain's got a couple of bases. You got Ireland and the UK there, Hungary. But you get a general idea. And as you read through this treaty, you can see information about their flight plans, how they're supposed to submit it, the specific requirements for the observation of the equipment and all that stuff. There is a lot of dry, boring stuff in here, but it is definitely worth reading through. And here is the URL right here at the top if you really want to go ahead and check this out yourself, or just a Google search Treaty on Open Skies. And that's pretty much it. But go ahead.
Well, so what do they have at Luke Air Force Base that is more top secret than the stuff they have at Area 51?
To be honest, I have no idea, because Area 51, to be honest, I don't think they really do too much top secret stuff there. I'm pretty sure they use another base now, but because all the footage that you see on Google Maps, that's all footage taken from the Department of Agriculture right there.
Well, last I heard, the Skunk Works from Lockheed was still working out of Area 51.
Yeah. Well, as I said, when it comes to Area 51 and on its operations, it's all pure speculation at this point, because they don't announce all their classified stuff. Yeah, you'll have your testing aircraft flying out of there most likely, because it's the perfect place. If something's going to go down, it's fairly flat out there, and you can land aircraft in an emergency-style place, and most places are generally right around that area, and be able to recover it in a decent amount of time.
Well, you know, flying saucers only go straight up and straight down, so it's no big deal.
But that's pretty much all I have to cover on those 2 aspects. I think we pretty much covered everything that is when it comes to legal analysis on this issue.
Well, can anybody think of anything that some of these idiots were commenting about that you want to stick in here and address? Or if not, then we can be done with this and just visit.
I'm not wearing an address. I'm done.
All I gotta say is, even though it's restricted like with Area 51's restricted airspace, or the controlled airspace of that's around Luke Air Force Base, I know of a few ways of filming legally those areas from an aerial angle where it's completely legal. And as is, you view it from, you can be flying in the controlled airspace over there by Luke Air Force Base and film it, and it wouldn't be illegal at all. because that's public access for the most part. It's just like driving through a controlled intersection with stoplights. That's what controlled airspace, all that really means is you're being directed by a traffic controller because you got heavy enough flights through that area to warrant someone to make sure planes are not going to be running into each other.
Hey, David, maybe you ought to wear a dress and go back to the refinery where before MJ gets to go back.
That's okay. I'll pass on that one. What I was going to say was, you know, what we're seeing here is the military operating with a heavy hand against civilians unnecessarily. You know, they're so used to having to follow orders and do what they're told that when they get this mentality about them that everybody has to do that. And we're not subject to that. These people work for us. And I hate to say it, but we're seeing this more and more where they're coming off base to do these things and take these actions. And until they get slapped down and put back on the base where they belong, it's going to continue to happen. I mean, look at Steve and I there in Corpus. I mean, we were, I don't know, 30 yards off base, and they came out there to us. And, you know, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. When I was in the military, you know, if somebody was outside the base boundary, and I mean, if they were 1 foot outside the base boundary, we would have a supervisor tell us, it ain't our business. It's that simple.
And that's the way it should be. And that's the way I was, because I mentioned the OSI guy that I've talked to, you know, he says the same thing. Those guys should not be coming off that base. They should be calling the civilian authorities if they think that's necessary, but they should not step off that base.
Well, yeah, I mean, a good example is back when, I think it was, what was it, 2013 or was it 14 when I filmed Jay Bear? And I was well outside the base area. I was outside the fence line, and I had, what was it, OSI, I think it was, that piled out of that truck. It was like, hey, you can't be filming the base and all that stuff. And I had that plaid shirt guy getting all up in my face going, take the camera off the base. And then he's like, get the camera off me.
Lift it up.
Yeah, and of course I sat there and lifted up the camera above his head just to really screw with him. But
they followed you through the woods.
Well, they didn't follow me in the woods. That was the funny part. I was sitting there. I was disappointed. I really wanted to see how far. I was willing to walk all the way to downtown Anchorage with them telling me to see how far they would go. But they decided to stop at the woods there. So I was quite disappointed in their lack of resolve.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. So, all right, I think we're done. And if we're not, say something real quick, and we'll end this recording, and we'll just visit for a little bit.
I'll add one more thing for any of the military people that see this. You know, there are very, very few circumstances where the military has any jurisdiction off base. When you hit that base boundary, you are done. And you need to think about that and stop coming off post to harass civilians and photographers or whatever they're doing. If you got a problem, call the police. That's their job. And that's it.
Yeah, we're not anti-military. We're just trying to protect our rights, and they need to do it correctly, and they need to pay attention to our rights and the Constitution, which they swore to uphold, and do everything they're supposed to be doing legally.
And
yeah, it's not about picking on the military. You know, Keith is ex-Army. I'm ex-Army. Bunny Boots was military. I think he was Army.
I'm a disabled vet. Yeah, I'm disabled Army vet. So.
Yeah. So I mean, we're veterans, and so we're not picking on the military. It's not about picking on the military. All right. It's about boundaries. We all have our boundaries. We are all bound by the law, and you need to operate within the law, and you need to know where your boundaries are and stick to them. It's not that hard.
One thing I want to bring up, and this is kind of in relation to what we're talking about. If you look at the MP manual that the Army has, when it comes to protests, as we've seen before, whether protests in America or wherever the MPs are at, and if they're monitoring a protest, did you know in the manual, I don't know the FM, the name of the FM, but Steve, if you don't mind, if I send you a link, would you mind putting it in your discussion box?
Yeah, I can do
Steve? Okay. What it is it's from, I don't know if any of y'all have heard of Reason TV. They are an ideological channel. They lean, I think it's libertarian. But putting that aside, they have a colonel, I think he's a retired colonel, and he goes over what the police allowed during these protests. And it straight up says in there, do not mess with press or people taking photographs. It straight says that. So I just wanted to bring that up. And it kind of, a lot of times we talk about what's going on with police, the militarization of police. Well, some things I would kind of like military guidelines. Some of the military guidelines are actually pretty good if they actually follow it. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. On paper, you would think there would be no problem because on paper, we're more protected than ever on paper by the laws and everything. But if you can't abide by that, it does us no good.
Yeah, well, they're more protected from screwing up than ever too, so they can do whatever they want. You're breaking up real bad, Ben.
So that's all I wanted to bring up. Oh, what about now?
All right. Well, I stepped over you because I thought you were done, but then it was just a hesitation in there. So,
yeah.
All right.
But if you could tell the viewers, we'll add that link in the description box, and it's somewhat to do in relation with this, and it's a really good, it's a little 4-minute video, and it's pretty interesting.
Well, I'll just leave this part in, and we'll put that in the discussion box when they put the video up, and they'll have a link to it.
Hey, Steve.
Yes.
Remember, Keith is in Alabama. He's got Alabama internet. I'm driving down the highway through this whole video, and some of it was out in the country, and I'm doing this from the mobile, and so compare my internet to Alabama internet.
Yeah, and you're even on the Bluetooth, which kind of screws it up and not having as much problem as he is. Anyway, I think we're done for tonight. Bama Camera, thanks for being on. News Now Houston, David Bunny Boots, thank you to both of you. Silent Citizen, I know you're listening in the background. This is PNP News. Talk to you later. Next time. Bye.